My name is Jerome Ferry. My cameraman is Ellen Eggers. We're doing a video interview with Cheryl Rutledge, a longtime Cedar Rapidian and a 46-year employee at Iowa Manufacturing. Cheryl, tell us when and where you were born.
I was born in Elkport, Iowa in 1930. Elkport is about 12 miles from Guttenberg.
What was your parents' names?
My mother's name was Walda, and my father's name was Gilbert.
Did you have any brothers and sisters?
Yes, I had. There was 6 of us in the family. Yeah.
Where did boys, girls?
Well, there's 3 boys and 3 girls.
We'll
That's a
show.
picture.
Yeah,
right
we'll
there.
show that later. And where did you fit in this lineup here? Were you the
Of
youngest?
the family, I was the oldest.
You was the
I
oldest?
was the oldest, yes.
What was your dad's occupation?
At the time when we lived there, he was a Standard Oil salesman. When he had a tank truck, and it's when the railroad was still there, and they came in with the tank cars and unloaded it into his tank, and then he put it in his truck and went around to the individual farmers at that time.
Did you go to school then in Elkport?
No, I never went to school there because we moved from Elkport to Strawberry Point and then Elkader and then back to Guttenberg where I started to go to school.
So you kind of, when you was a young boy, you grew up in Guttenberg.
Yes.
Was you allowed to go down and play along the river?
Well, when I left in the morning, my mother never knew where I was at or when I was coming back.
Did you fish and hunt?
Oh,
on
yes,
Mississippi?
yeah. I used to, that was my thing, fishing, when I was a youngster, I'd fish along the river and especially, the individual people that took people over to the dam to fish off the barge, they always had a mini trap there, a box, and they'd throw out the dead minis, and I'd always take those and fish with them right next to the box, and I caught more fish than the people going and coming, and that used to really disturb them.
Your mother never worried about you, or didn't she know you were playing down around the river?
Oh, she knew that I was either down at the river or there were several sand pits, and I used to fish in the sand pits too.
In the wintertime, did you ever go ice fishing on the Mississippi?
Can't say as I ever did go ice fishing.
Back then, didn't they drive their old cars on the river?
I can say that at the time when we first moved there, my father, things weren't too good, but he drove his old truck across the Mississippi, and they'd cut timber off the islands there, and I remember at one time when he broke through. And of course he had to unload the logs and to get the truck out of there. But I spent a lot of time on the river there, and I even, of course, my uncle lived there and used to go duck hunting there, and I don't think we ever went fishing. It was always duck hunting, but I can remember one thing that sticks in my mind, especially about the river there. They have the locks there where they lock the boats through back and forth with the barges, but one time he always kept his boat up above the dam, and this one time he says, let's do something different, and of course this was just a wooden homemade boat, which most of them were at that time, and they had the biggest motor you could get, and we went flying down the river, and I didn't know what he was going to do, and we went right through the gates, where the spill water comes through, and it was something else.
This was your brothers and sisters?
Yes.
And your mother? And
Yes.
your dad evidently had passed away
Yes.
at this time.
He was in an automobile accident
Cedar Rapids?
over by Central City.
Mm-hmm.
Be a great uncle is what it was, yeah.
In the summertime, what did you do when you're out of school? Did you go away and spend your vacations with your uncle, or?
Well, I spent as much time as I possibly could in Elkport with my Aunt Mary and Uncle Henry. And he was a big old German, and they never had any children, and he was a sheep buyer there, and I'd go with him in his old 28 Chevy and drive around the country buying sheep, and then they had maybe 2 or 3 cows there. The house sat on one side of the street, right on the edge of town, and the rest of the farm was on the other side. And they had 2 or 3 cows, like I said, and they'd milk those, and then they'd bring the milk over to the house, and it wasn't separated or anything back then. It was put in quart fruit jars and set between the back house. The back of it was screened in between there and the wash house, or where they did cooking too, as far as canning in the summer, on the table, and people had come in and they just throw a nickel in the fruit jar and go on their way. Everybody trusted everyone, you know. But the gist of the whole story there is that whenever I wanted to go downtown to the drugstore, which was still in existence at that time, there weren't too many businesses left, but there was always the taverns, you know, the drugstore and the grocery store, and they'd always just hand the jar to me and tell me to reach in and take as many nickels as I wanted to, and so chocolate ice cream was my thing at that time, you know, and I think it got to the point where I couldn't handle chocolate anymore.
Did he kind of have you use you as a hired man to help him do odd chores? And
well, I can't, yeah, to some extent, I guess. He had a couple more farms too. Yeah, we did. In fact, the other day I was looking at one of my old magazines, and it showed him making hay, with pulling the hay rack with the horses and the hay loader behind, and then you had to pitch that hay around and get it spread until you had a full load, you know. And then, well, yes, it really sticks in my mind is now this old German, he knew what the dollar was all about, so he'd always buy horses from, they called it the Fox Farm. Well, they used to feed, years ago, I guess they fed the horses, killed them off and fed them to foxes wherever they were raising foxes for their pelts, you know. But anyway, to get back to helping him on the farm, why, when we'd make hay there, he had one horse he'd hooked to the hay rope to pull the hay up, and he'd have me drive that horse. Now this was uphill, and everything that he owned was not in good shape because he was still squeezing that dollar, you know. And I used to hate to do that, and I'd get as far off to one side or the other with the reins because I figured at any time that single tree could break or the rope and it'd wipe me out. But yeah, I can remember doing that for him.
Then did you have to go back to the barn, get off the horse, and pull the rope back, or?
Well, I was you walk behind it. I was walking behind it. See, that's why I was concerned about the rope and the single tree, because I had the reins in my hand, and should have been leading the horse if I had any. Now that I think about it, instead of behind it.
Now, do you remember your grandparents?
Yes.
Did they live up there around Elkport, Guttenberg?
Well, my father's father and mother, they lived in Elkport. Originated, well, they came from down south, he did, but he was in the automobile business way back in like the 17, 18 back then, and he sold I can't say offhand right now what kind of cars they were, but he was a genuine junk dealer. He accumulated more than I do, and every time some business would close up there in town, a store or whatever, he'd buy the building and start filling it up, you know. And and the thing that you know that I tell young folks, be sure you sit down and spend time with your grandparents and let them tell you their life history and what they did and so on and so forth, which I didn't do because, you know, like I say, that what's wrong with the world, everybody's in a hurry to get nowhere.
That's right.
But anyway, he, at one time, which I didn't know until I looked it up in the book, he supplied the lighting for the town of Elkport at one time. Yeah, just the street lighting, but it was something else.
What do you mean he supplied?
He had his generator. He put up the poles. He put up the lights. And,
You had mentioned your uncle being a sheep buyer. Was there that many sheep being raised in that part of the state back then?
yes, there were. And then he'd take those after he had a certain number of sheep, and then they'd take them by truck, which my uncle was a trucker there. That was his business, and he'd haul them to Guttenberg, and they put them on the train there, and he'd ride to Chicago in the caboose. And actually, I think it was kind of one of those things I shouldn't say it, for him to get away from home, and do his thing, because he always bought his supply of whiskey there. And that was another...
Kill two birds with one stone.
He always left his old car at our house, and my mother always had a cot there in the kitchen by the cook stove, and when he'd come home, the train might come in the middle of the night, and he'd get off the train there. Sometimes he'd fire up the old car and go for home, or he'd come in and lay down for a while. But to get back to getting a supply of his whiskey, this one time in particular, I remember he took off for Elkport in the old car, and at that time the road going out of Guttenberg to Garber, I mean, of course that's steep there, and that was just gravel, and he was putzing up there probably in low gear, and he just finished off a pint of whiskey, and he thought the door glass was down on the rider's side, and he threw it and took out the glass, Of course, at that time, those cars, they had tempered glass in the windows. They weren't shatterproof like they are today. But
What'd your dad do in Guttenberg? What was his
he
occupation?
was a car salesman.
What brand of cars?
Well, he sold Chevrolet and he sold Fords both. Yeah.
Of course, you'd been around 10. Could you remember? Did he sell that many cars that he could make a living at?
Oh yeah. But at that time, I remember especially when he worked for the Chevrolet dealer. It was Hall Chevrolet. It was there, and this fella had a farm right outside of town. And at that time, when you made a car deal, you traded for this, that, or whatever. I mean, so this fella had cows out there, he had pigs out there, and whatever was part of the deal. And,
so it wasn't always cash transactions.
No, and at that time, as I recall, the new Chevy, which I think there was probably only one model, period, they cost like $800.
Mm-hmm. So when did your family move to Cedar Rapids?
We moved when the war broke out, 1941.
1941?
There were no cars anymore.
That soon after the war broke out, the government decided they couldn't use the steel for...
There just wasn't that many cars at all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what did he do then when he come to Cedar Rapids?
Well, he went to work at Iowa Manufacturing.
And how many years did he put in there?
Well, let's see. He'd have to start there probably 1942, and I was trying to think. I think he worked there probably till. Well, he was still running back and forth trying to do car deals at Guttenberg, so it was in the early 50s, I think, when he passed away.
Did he ever mention to you what Iowa Man, were they making anything for the war effort? Were they making
rock crushers? Yeah.
Rock crushers?
Oh, yeah.
For,
yeah, that was a big thing with them.
And the army was probably using those, or the engineer corps was probably using those to build roads with.
Runways, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, they made lots and lots of them.
So where did you go to grade school in Cedar Rapids?
I went over to Garfield.
Mm-hmm. And then high school, did you go to high school?
Yeah, came over on, we moved down on 6th Street, 3rd Avenue, and I went to Roosevelt.
Did you, and then did you graduate from Roosevelt?
No, I didn't.
So when you left high school, what did you find for gainful employment?
Well, I wasn't old enough to go to work in the respect of, you had to be 18 to go into
To
a
a
factory.
factory.
And I worked at different odd jobs here and there in town.
Then, when you did then go to Iowa Man when you got 18, I
Yes.
take it?
Yes.
And what was you remember what your first job was?
Well, at that time, I was connected with the maintenance and electrical department all the time that I was there. But when I first started there, I worked with another fella, and at that time, all we did was go around and wash all the reflectors in the whole factory. And if you can imagine that, in the machine shop here, there, and replace the light bulbs, and just with a step ladder and a couple buckets and water, and it's just unheard of, today.
You're talking about the reflectors on
Yes.
all the light fixtures in the
Yes,
place.
Yes.
And I can imagine they got quite dirty too.
Some of them you really had to scrub, but I did that for, I don't know, probably a year or two, and then I got on as electrician or apprentice. That's,
Do you remember what your starting wage was?
well, I think at that time it was about $1.09 or something like that.
Do you recall, was there any women working there at Iowa Man when you started? In
Not
the
as,
shop
not
itself?
as far as the factory, no,
Yeah.
but of course they were
Yeah.
in the office.
Remember your first foreman?
Oh yeah, he was all the way through, you might say, and
What was his name?
Bill Miller,
Bill Miller?
Yeah.
You had mentioned the Lowell
Swanson.
Swanson
Yeah.
too?
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, I should take that back. Bill Miller was actually the superintendent, you might say, and Swanson, he was one of the foremen. Yes.
mhm. Did you ever get to meet Howard, or would
Oh.
Howard come around through the plant,
Oh,
Howard
yes,
Hall?
he did. Yes. Quite often he could walk through the plant.
Was he a personable type of?
Yes, he was. Yeah.
He would wave, or
Very common. Yeah. Just because he had money and owned the factory didn't make any difference. He was just people, good people.
Yeah. You were telling me a story about that back early on there, that he used to hire prisoners.
Yes, he did. That were
On a
those
work release.
on a work release, or those that just got out. But there were several of them that I actually knew. That one sticks in my mind now, and I can't say his name, but I know the fella. He made out real good. He ended up owning all kinds of property up on First Avenue from 13th Street on up in that area.
What year did you start?
48.
1948. Was this boom times as far as Iowa Man after the war, and they got
Well,
reorganized?
they were going good as far as.
So would there have been a shortage of help? Would that maybe why he leaned towards using prisoner help on work release?
No, I don't think so. He was just.
He was that sort of a person.
Yeah, he
You'd give
wants to
somebody a
help
break.
people out.
Yeah.
Yeah, give them a chance to get themselves back in order again. Yeah.
When you started doing electrical, you mentioned you did electrical work. What would you do on the assembly line? I suppose they called them assembly lines. What type of electrical work did you do?
Well, actually, I was a production electrician at that time, and at that time I was involved in the asphalt plants. You know, they were great for building asphalt plants there, and I we have these big control cabinets that controlled all the individual motors. There might be like 30 different motors or drives on the asphalt plant, depending on how big a plant was, and so these control cabinets had to be wired. They were probably 6-7 feet high, 4 feet wide, and about 4 feet deep, and there was a big doors on each side. One side to have all the fuse blocks on it. Back then it was fuse blocks. You didn't have circuit breakers. And then on the other side be all the starters. And my boss, he everything at that time, all the wiring you put in there, every bend had to be just perfect, you know. And so when you got done, it was nice. It really looked good.
I was just going to ask you, did it look like a rat's nest when you got done, or was everything parallel and nice square corners?
Yeah, everything was, it was really nice.
Do you remember if you tied the cables, or if you laced them, or used cable ties, or?
Well, there was no such thing as cable ties
Like
at that time.
But did you use, what type of cord? Would they have a nylon type of cord that would stand the weather?
You mean in the panel
in
itself?
The panel?
Well, of course, the panel was all enclosed, and now that brings back to my memory too. You know, all this wire we used was rockbestos. It was a rockbestos insulation on it, and it was all of it that we were using was when we made all these turns in there. Then after we got it all, I'd hold it all in there as much as you could as you were going along, and then I'd take little metal strips about 3/8 of an inch wide and real light material, but then I'd take those, go and have them sheared and cut those big long strips, and then I'd take them and put them in the vise and bend them so I can form them around, drill and tap the panel, and then they'd go on there. And then after it was done, go and paint all those up. So all, you know, it was factory.
Cable clamps.
Yeah.
Did you have inspectors that would come around and check your work, the quality of your work?
Yeah.
Or did you do your own?
No, they. Of course, we ran every drive on these plants. Everything that had a motor on it, we hooked everything up and run everything, and got the rotation on everything, so that when you brought in the power source, these were all 3-phase motors, every motor was running in the rotation it was supposed to, whether it was on a conveyor or whatever it may be. And so when they hooked it up out in the field, when they hooked up their power coming into the plant, if one motor ran wrong, all they had to do was switch 2 wires and away they go. Mm-hmm. They didn't have to go around and play with every one. And all the cables that were run to the individual drives too, they were all marked. So of course a lot of the cables were monsters, you know, depending on how big the motor was. They take everything was marked, so it couldn't go wrong.
Mm-hmm. Thinking back now, was Iowa Man, did they employ a lot of people, hundreds of people?
Oh, yes, they did. In fact, it always sticks in my mind that the one big layoff that they had there was like 800 people laid off at one time. And I truthfully can't tell you what year that was. It was a big slowdown.
Now, did Iowa Man, did they get a lot of their steel products from Iowa Steel?
Yes, they got, of course, from Iowa Steel, you know, that was basically any of the castings they got came from Iowa Steel, and then they went through the machine shop. But
that you would use at Iowa Man?
Yes, right. But the actual flat steel or anything, of course, that was all from other companies.
Mm-hmm. Other foundries. Did Mr. Hall own Iowa Steel? Or?
Yes.
So what year did you get married? You don't get any help on this one.
1950.
1950? And who did you marry?
Evelyn Sokup.
Mm-hmm. What, was she a Cedar Rapids girl?
Yes.
Where'd you meet?
In school at Taylor School.
Mm-hmm. When you were that young?
Well, let's see. Have to be. I don't know what grade that'd been.
Yeah. Were you friends? Were you friends growing up, or
Yeah.
you were? And did you get married in Cedar Rapids?
No, Marengo.
What was her dad's occupation then?
He was a foreman, a link belt speeder.
Mm-hmm. Did she work? Evelyn, your wife?
Yes.
Where'd she work then?
Well, there was a
That's okay. If
Hoover vacuum cleaner,
if
but
you
I
can.
don't know where it was
No,
before that.
That's okay. After you'd gotten married, then had you got a promotion yet, or did you advance in? As you had mentioned, you were a lead man.
Well, actually, that was probably 3 or 4 years,
Mm-hmm.
and I became a lead man.
And then you also said you got in. Was this a lead man in the maintenance department?
Electrical maintenance. Yeah.
And what is electrical maintenance? Any of the electrical equipment in the
Yeah,
plant, or
yeah.
any wiring that had to be done?
Right.
Your department would
Yes.
take care of it.
Yes.
Did you ever get a chance to go to Bruce Moore?
Oh, many times. Many times.
Because you were head of the maintenance department, and Howard would use the maintenance department to do.
There was somebody from the plant out there constantly. There were either painters there or somebody doing something either at Bruce Moore or at his place at Lower Palisades.
Did you ever get the chance to meet Margaret and his wife,
yeah.
Margaret?
I used to, I think I might have mentioned that before, that, they'd go to their home in Florida, and but when they'd come back, why, we always seemed to be, my boss and I'd go out to Bruce Moore, see if everything was okay, and
Before they got back?
no, I mean, when they did
Oh,
get
what-
back, but she used to call me in, and she always had this room where she sat and talked to, be like a secretary, I'm sure, and caught up on everything, and she'd call me in there and want to know what was new and so on and so forth, and he used to get pretty disturbed because I was in there doing that and he wasn't.
You were telling a story about down in his basement, his rec room down there.
Yes. About the Hawaiian room.
Yeah, the
Yes,
Hawaiian
yeah.
room. Yeah.
Yeah, that was quite a room down there. It had it was all like the bamboo post, like it revert to Hawaii, and
Mm-hmm.
it had a corrugated tin roof on it. This whole room did, and then you could turn the switch on, and water had come down on top of that roof, and it'd run off into gutters on both sides of the room, or one side at least. And then he had another little bar room in there with a slot machine in the bar and the usual things you'd find in a bar. And the thing that I always tormented anybody that I had with me was the fact of he had this one, the restroom down there. There was a very dim light burning in there, and when you opened the door, he had this mannequin sitting there on the stool. And I always used to send the guys when they want to go where the restroom is, I said, right over there. And they'd come back cussing me because of it. And then another thing that I remember, one fella in particular that I had out there with me, and he carried a ball peen hammer around in his hand because he was afraid of Howard's police dogs, And I can remember being out there at one time with this fella, and we were sitting there at noon, and in the Hawaiian room, and I just sat down on the floor there and having my lunch and feeding the dog too, and this guy sitting over in the corner he says, You're crazy, man. You got to be crazy feeding those dogs. But yeah, that was quite a thing. The police dogs, you know. The one time I told you, I think about the time it went right through the front door glass there, racing down the stairway because somebody rang the doorbell and jumped up on the glass, and the whole works come flying out.
He had a lion too, didn't he, Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Did he used to take that around with him?
No, tell you, actually, before the lion was gone before I came to work out there, but my aunt and uncle moved into that neighborhood from up in northern Iowa, and when they moved in, they wanted to know what that roar was they heard every so often, especially at night. And I told them it was a lion, and they said, "Oh, no, it can't be a lion," because they were farm people, and they said never heard anything like that before. So I told them where to go over, because you know he had it caged up, and so people could come there and look at it. But I had finally convinced them that it was a lion.
Did Mr. Hall have caretakers?
Oh yes, there were
at
several.
Christmas Mart?
Yeah.
What was their? Do you remember the name?
Well, the one in particular that I was a caretaker there, he did the mowing the grounds, and his name was Melcha. In fact, he was an uncle to this Toonie Melcha, this friend of mine, and he was very particular about everything.
The two of you probably got to know each other too,
Oh, yeah.
since you were in maintenance then.
But this particular fella, I always tell people about this. He at that time he had kept his car right in the same garage area where Mr. Hall kept his Cadillac and where the boat was stored in the wintertime. And but he'd just drive that car downtown, and when he come back, he'd wash it. And he always wore bib overalls, and they were spotless. So I don't know. I don't recall seeing him working too much, but I guess he must have to keep the grounds mowed there.
Mr. Hall had a private pilot for his plane.
Yeah, Major Robert Ray.
Did you know
Oh yeah, I
Mr.
know Bob Ray.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I imagine they kept it out at a hangar, his plane out at a hangar out there?
Out the airport.
Yeah. Now, did you ever go out there to...
Yes, I have. I don't know what particular reasons that boss, the superintendent, and I had gone out there, but that's... I think probably that one thing we were trying to do is talk them into giving us a ride, but it never happened.
The time period we were talking about would have been the early 50s when television first come out. And would television been something Howard Hall would have you guys rig up for him?
They had a 60-foot tower put up on top of Brucemore. I truthfully can't say if I was there when it was put up. I don't remember exactly, but well, you can imagine just being up on Brucemore. It's right up there. But anyway, they had this tower up there for the TV, and then as the TV advanced or changed, he didn't need the tower, or he didn't want it up there anymore. I don't recall the circumstances, but remember, in order to make to pick up the signal, we built a motor in a box, and it was like in fact, we put it in a mailbox, I think it was, and mounted it up on top so you could do the rotation of it. And I can remember crawling up there at different times when it didn't work, and it seemed like every time I went up there, it was nice and calm on the roof. But when I got up there, I thought the wind was going to blow me off. But that never bothered me as far as the height. But that particular the gist of this story is too that my boss used to hire different guys come in. Well, this happened to be a guy was a steel worker, and he was working with us, and they wanted the tower taken down. And we went out there, and we had a couple of sections or more taken off the top already, and this guy, he was a real character. Big John, I called him, and he was, like I say, a steel worker. He crawled around all over, and height didn't mean anything to him. And he got up on top of the tower finally when we got part of it taken down, and he says, "I'll show you how you get these down in a hurry." And he cut the cables, and he rode that down, and when it came down, it was right. He was hanging right over the edge of the roof.
You had mentioned his Howard had a summer home
Lower Palisades.
at the Lower Palisades.
Yeah, right.
And did you do maintenance duties down there too?
Spent a lot of time there. Yeah.
That was probably good duty, especially in the summertime.
Well, yeah, I can remember. Well, used to have. I'd have a couple electricians out there at maybe there for 2 or 3 weeks, because all the wiring at that time we had was all stretched in the trees for all the lighting and everything. And we maintained Joe Riley's cabin too, Tom Riley's father.
That was next door to Mr. Hall's.
It was right in that area there, and and these fellas were always working out there, and I had them running cable underground. So they were there for several days at a time, and then I remember one time when we had a very severe winter, lots of snow. I don't know how my boss got that in his head, but he says that I should take this fellow with me and go out there and see if we take the snow off the roof of his cottage. And it was probably a couple feet deep, and that roof had never collapsed there, because that was made just like with the big barn beams, like the old barns were built. And anyway, this guy wouldn't get up on there, because the cottage actually would be like here, and there's where you go into the river. So I said, "Well, I'll show you how it's done." Got the ladder out, and I was dressed for it, and just went up on top and tied the rope around the chimney, and I measured out the length that it should be, and then I'd jump into the snow and push it off. He told me I was crazy.
Howard used to have floodlights on the face of the bluff, didn't he, to shine on the river?
Well, there was lights all over, yes. And he had his boathouse down there, of course.
Did he maintain a boat down on the river?
Well, this boat like I have here.
That one there. This is very similar to the boat he had?
Yes. On that order, that was the type of boat it was. It was called a Dodge water car, what the boat was. It was a wooden boat. It had originally a 4-cylinder engine in it, and over the years, of course, we had a maintenance garage at the factory, and they decided that motor was too small for that boat, so they took and put a Ford V8 motor in there. I think it was probably about a 36 or 37 Ford V8. And then after some time, they decided that wasn't the right thing, because I ended up with the motor, how you knowing the right guy in politics and monkeying with cars, but they put another 4-cylinder engine back in it, and that was the last that I know of. So,
evidently, he used this boat down there before the dam washed out, just below his place.
Well, I can't say in respect to that. I don't know when that dam actually washed out, because the boat was. He had this boathouse that they pulled up into a cove there. It was just a big on barrel floats at the time. Then they made floats for it out in the factory, welded them up. But they used to take that back out and pull it up. There must have been hundreds of steps that went all the way down there, But the boat was it was always put in there, and it was kept out at Brucemore, though.
That was a pretty secluded place out there. Was that secure? Did you have burglar alarms out there?
Yes, we did.
Did somebody break into it?
Never had any problems in that respect that I know of, no. But we had alarm system in there, and then that went from there up to the farmhouse up on top of the bluff there where the
Was that his?
caretaker lived.
Was that Howard's Hall's farm that where all the wildlife used to be at?
That's right. They raised pheasants there, and he had elk there too. There was big high fences all the way around there, and there was I don't know how many elk in there.
Back in those days when you were in the maintenance department, did you? I know how it was at other places. Did you find yourself doing Swiss Navy jobs for a lot of the executives?
Spent a lot of time at Riley's home, Joe Riley's, and some of the, depend on some of the vice presidents. I can't say the names right offhand right now.
Well, we don't need to mention any names.
But
did you get caught up in the Korean War?
yeah, I was in reserve in the Marines, and
Why the Marines? Why did you choose the Marines?
my cousin talked me into that. I just don't understand to this day yet what. I think he just came around one day and says, "Let's go over and get in the reserve." And this was prior to the Korean War, so that's how I got into the Marine Corps.
Did you end up serving any duty, or did you?
Yeah, I went. I was gone and went to San Diego and went through basic training there, which taught me a lot, and I never will forget it. And I think all kids should have it. They don't do that anymore, I don't think, but they put you through the program then, I'll tell you.
That was probably helped mature you quite a bit in a short time.
Yeah, sure did.
Did you have any children yet when you went to the service?
Evelyn came out there, and she was pregnant, and our oldest son Chuck was born out there in
San Diego?
Camp Pendleton at the Naval Hospital.
So, when did you return to Cedar Rapids after the service? Then
that was in a couple of years of what it was.
53.
Something like that.
And did they hold your job at
Oh
Iowa
yes,
Man?
yes.
Did they tell you that they would hold your job?
Well, that was all part of the contract with the union, of course.
What type of job did you have when you come back to Iowa Man?
Well,
same type of
Yeah,
job?
just
right?
slipped
back
right
to
into the
maintenance.
maintenance
Mhm.
notch, electrical.
Did they have they had a union? It was unionized, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Was it a strong union?
Yeah.
Did you belong to the same union as the factory, or did you belong to the Electrical Brotherhood?
No, it was the same all the way around. It was a union, but I can say actually it wasn't anything where anybody was very strong or severe about you taking my job or this or that. Of course, there's always a little bit going on, but the whole factory actually was like a big family out there to me. Because, especially I knew everybody in the place, not necessarily by name, but by seeing them, and talking to them all the way through the factory in the office, and but everybody got along fine. Everybody did their thing.
Did they ever hire any women in the factory out there?
Yes, they were
Later
some
on,
before I left.
Mhm.
Yeah.
When you come back in '53, was Howard still the head of the place, or
Oh yeah, yeah.
I don't know when he started losing his health.
I don't remember exactly when he did die. I've got all that information someplace, but I can't say right offhand.
But later on, when he did get ill and passed away, then who was...
Well, then Raytheon took over.
Wasn't... didn't Mr. Hall have a brother-in-law
Yeah.
that stepped in as far as...
No, well, no, he, you mean in respect of running the business or that? Well, it, I suppose you might say that they did run it to some extent, but it was strictly the law firm that was involved in it.
Well, I thought Beal Perrin comes
Yeah,
to mind.
Prine. Yeah.
Beal Perrin,
Yeah.
his brother-in-law.
They lived, just skipping a hop from Brucemore right there.
So when did you finally retire?
Let's see, I can't even say what year it was now.
1994.
94?
Yeah. And of course, this was Raytheon owned the company by that time.
Yes.
Did you notice any difference in the operation of the company after?
It wasn't the same old family program anymore. Every day there was too much politics in there, and the people that were in supervision or in the plant or in the office, of course, they were trying to save their jobs, so there's a lot of things going on all the time.
Hobbies throughout your later life and after retirement, did you have hobbies?
Well, I guess that I was always interested in the old cars, and plus my friend Fred Van Dyke that owned the salvage yard that's still on 6th Street out here, and Fred and I put the first car on that property, and I got to know him when he came to town, and he first had a yard up in off Ellis Boulevard, which he rented from Peter Graw, which is Benny Graw's father, which about everybody knows Benny Graw in town, I think. But then he bought that property out there, and so that's my second home, you might say.
When Van Dyke, did he intend to start a junkyard there, or did it just happen?
Oh no, he intended to. Of course, when you say junkyard, he.
That's not the correct term
No,
to use.
well,
Junkyard.
used
car.
What I was going to say is, it was called his daughter, who was a judge out east someplace now. He only had one child, and she'd just go wild. Of course, even when she was just a kid, if anybody called her father's place a junkyard, it was a salvage yard.
Salvage yard. Yeah. Did your wife was telling me that you had a love for fire trucks?
Yeah. I've got a 31 Chevy fire truck and a hose cart, the old high-wheeled hose cart they used to pull with the hose wrapped up around it.
Do you ever get a chance to display it at any events or functions?
I haven't had it out for years. In fact, when I mentioned that, I got a 29 Model A in there too, and I had a 25 Model T Roadster, and I gave that to my grandson. And it was all in pieces. He's going to restore it. Well, waiting to see about that. But anyway, I had people want to see my fire truck, and it'd be just like you asking me about it. I'd say, I always tell them, we'll come back in a week, and they always say, why? And I said, because I don't know where it's at. The place is too many things in there. In fact, I've been giving a lot of my old stuff to my boys, and they really like the old stuff too, especially I should say our oldest son, Chuck. He's the executive vice president of Half Motor Company, but he's come to like the old things, where before he was always throwing everything away. So all these things that I keep giving him this little thing and this little item, and he's got them all displayed in his house.
I think that comes with maturity. The older you get, the more
Appreciate the things.
more you appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you and your wife travel much?
Well, we've traveled a lot.
Have you?
Yeah.
Like where?
Well, we got well, that picture right there. That's our friend's home in France, in southern France. There.
Did you say this was a friend of yours at this place? In France?
In France.
In France? Did you get to go over there and visit with them very much? It looks like a pretty nice place.
We've been there how many times? 4 times?
Yeah.
3 or 4.
Yeah. Why was it that you happened to become acquainted with these people in France?
Well, they're like I say, the 2 boys were exchange students, and they were only going to be here for a couple of weeks, and they were only like 10 and 11 years old, I think, at that time. And the school called Evelyn, and they needed a place for a couple more of the kids to stay. So, of course, our family's all grown up. So she said, okay. And but anyway, the gist of the story in the respect of getting to know his folks real well is we were up to McGregor, and he got a pain in his side and ended up having a ruptured appendix. So he ended up in the hospital, and his father had to come here to get him after a month or so, and invited us there, and we've been back and forth. And in fact, his folks live on outskirts of Paris, and that is a home that they fixed up. It's something else to see. It's got 8 bedrooms in it.
Imagine, yes.
But the young fellow that I'm talking about, we went to his wedding here a few years ago, and just super nice people. And but he and his wife were up in the Alps. She was 8 months pregnant, and he was skiing. They went out for a walk, and she fell over dead, and that just crushed his heart. So it was one of those things. But several years have passed now, and he just remarried. In fact, we were invited to come to the wedding too, but there was just too many things going on at the time. Mm-hmm. So we told them when they have their first child, we'll come see him.
Did you ever get the chance to go down to Marathon, where Mr. Hall used to have his
Yes.
summer residence down there?
Evelyn and I went down there.
Did you find his place?
Yes. Just so happened when we went down there, the gist of the story in this respect too is that I knew the fellow that was a caretaker down there, and he'd come to Brucemore, and I could tell from, not saying that I'm a good judge of character, but I could see that he wasn't too swift on doing anything, I should say. But anyway, Evelyn and I went down to Florida to see my friend Van Dyke. He bought a salvage yard down there, and a home down there. And anyway, so we said, well, let's go Marathon and look up Howard's place. Well, we took his Cadillac, and naturally it had Iowa plates on it. And when there's a causeway that goes over to the island where Howard's place was, and this guy was sitting there with a fishing pole in his hand. Like I said before, I didn't think he was too swift on doing much of anything. Well, when he saw that Cadillac with those Iowa plates on, why, you thought he had a rocket in his pocket. And he was super nice to us about everything.
Cheryl, would you like to introduce your wife?
This is my wife, Evelyn. My dear wife, Evelyn. She's quite a go-getter. She's a full-blooded Chesky, and she lets me know it quite often.
Evelyn, in growing up, when you were a child, what part of Iowa were you from? Cedar Rapids, or?
I was born in Center Point, and I moved here at the age of 3.
Mm-hmm.
And we moved on 3rd Street Southwest, which is now I-380. I went to Van Buren for kindergarten, and then I went over to Taylor. And he didn't mention that he went to 6th grade at Taylor. That's how we met each other, was in 6th grade at Taylor.
Okay.
He went to Roosevelt, and I went to Wilson.
Mm-hmm. When you got married, 1950.
1950.
Did you said you didn't have a wedding picture of when you got married?
I do have one, but I put it away.
Okay.
I think it's in the cedar chest.
What did you do other than? Did you have a job other than raising your family?
I worked for Christensen's Tax Service. Well, really at 14 or 15 I started working at McClellan's. And then after I graduated I went to Staymates Publishing Company, Kirby Company, and then when he was in the service I just worked for Christensen's Tax Service.
Mm-hmm.
Then I was a full-time mom until David, our youngest son, was in 2nd grade, and then I went to work at Pennington Ford for about 3 years, and then I moved over to Iowa Electric Light and Power. And I retired from there, which was called IES at that time.
Mm-hmm. How many children did you have?
We have 2 boys, Chuck and David.
We're going to show some pictures now, and you can tell us who is who. Is this one of the babies here?
Yes, it is. It's my husband. When he was 6 months old.
Really?
He weighed 26 pounds at that age.
And this is?
This is our oldest son, Charles, Chuck we call him, and his wife, Chris, and their daughter, Heather.
Are they from the Cedar Rapids area then?
Yes, Chuck was born in Camp Pendleton, Oceanside, California, but of course he came back with us when he was about 9 months old. And they lived in Cedar Rapids until just last year. They moved to Swisher. They built a new home on 5 acres of timber.
Mm-hmm.
And this is their daughter, Heather, now that she's graduated. And she is also here. She is going to she's going to Kirkwood right now, but as it plans right now, she's going to go to Cedar Falls next year.
Mm-hmm. Very nice. And this is, Evelyn?
This is David, our youngest son, and his wife, Dawn, and their oldest son, Seth, and their youngest, Sean. And this is a more recent picture of them. This is Seth and his fiancee, Anita. And Seth graduated from a military academy in Missouri. And this is our youngest grandson, Sean, and he is going to Center Point School right now. And he loves to ride motorcycles.
Very nice. When was this taken, Evelyn?
It's taken about 4 years ago. It was from the Commercial Federal Bank. They gave us this picture free.
Very nice.
We used.
Did you mention, Evelyn, what your boys do today?
Our oldest son is Executive Vice President at Hub Electric, and our youngest son is an engineer at Rockwell Collins.
When they were young, did you and Cheryl do traveling then that they could go along, or was your traveling in later years?
We did take them to the Bahamas for a couple of weeks. My sister and her husband lived there, and our oldest son, Chuck, learned how to scuba dive and went underneath in the beautiful ocean there to see everything, the marine life. He really enjoyed that. I remember when they were teaching him how to use it, she threw a part of it into the swimming pool and told him to go put it in his mouth, and he came up. He was full of water from trying to get it in, but he learned how to do it. And David, our youngest son, just loved the starfish there. And we went fishing too at that time, and Chuck caught a 70 or an 80 pound, what was it, some type of a fish. And just as he was beginning to get to the point where he was going to land it, the shark took the tail off. He was really upset because he was going to bring that home and mount it.
Thank you, Evelyn. Before I leave you, Evelyn, did you have any hobbies that compared to Cheryl's, that as far as time consuming? Or?
Yes, I have a doll collection, and I started collecting in 1973.
Going on almost 30 years.
Yes, and I have always loved dolls, even as a child.
We are going to do an interview with you at a later date on your collection. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Cheryl, unless you have any more memories to share with us, the Cedar Rapids History Center, the Linn County Historical Society would like to thank you very much for sharing your memories with us.
Enjoyed it very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.